The heavy glass doors of Le Chateau swung open, admitting a figure who moved like shadow through golden light. He was a man who carried wealth in his posture. Straight shoulders, measured steps, eyes that had seen boardrooms and conquered empires. Yet as he approached the mahogany hostess stand, something was different. His lips remained sealed, his voice trapped in a prison of silence that only he understood. The hostess barely glanced up from her reservation book, her manicured finger already pointing dismissively toward the back corner where they seated the difficult guests. In this world of crystal chandeliers and whispered stock tips, silence was mistaken for weakness. The man nodded graciously, accepting his fate as he was led past tables filled with the city's elite. Men whose laughter echoed off marble walls, women whose jewelry caught the light like captured stars. None of them noticed the quiet dignity in his stride, the expensive simplicity of his tailored suit, or the way his eyes took in every detail of the restaurant, as if he were cataloging something precious. He settled into his corner table, isolated from the main dining room's warmth, and opened the leather-bound menu with hands that moved with deliberate precision. When the waiter approached, a young man with slick-back hair and an expression of barely concealed annoyance, the real performance began. The man pointed to an item on the menu, his finger steady and sure. But when he opened his mouth to speak, only air escaped. He tried again, gesturing more emphatically, his face maintaining perfect composure even as frustration flickered behind his eyes. The waiter's eyebrows raised in theatrical confusion, and suddenly the quiet corner became a stage for cruelty. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand," the waiter said, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the neighboring tables. "Are you trying to order something?" The words dripped with condescension, each syllable a small knife designed to wound dignity itself. From across the dining room, heads began to turn. The city's socialites, those beautiful, terrible creatures who fed on drama like vampires on blood, sensed entertainment in the air. A woman in emerald silk leaned toward her companion, her whisper carrying like smoke. "Oh my God, is he?" Another diner, a man whose gold watch cost more than most people's cars, openly stared while cutting his wagyu beef, as if the struggle at the corner table was dinner theater arranged for his amusement. The man tried once more, his hands moving in careful, deliberate patterns, a language older than cruelty, more beautiful than mockery. But in this cathedral of privilege, sign language was as foreign as empathy. The waiter stepped back dramatically, throwing his hands up in exaggerated helplessness. "Sir, if you can't communicate properly, maybe this isn't the right establishment for you." Laughter began to ripple through the restaurant like a poison tide. It started as snickers behind champagne flutes, then grew into open chuckles as more diners joined the spectacle. The man's silence became their entertainment, his dignity their punchline. A woman's voice cut through the din. "Maybe he should try McDonald's. They have picture menus there." The cruelty escalated with each passing minute. When the man attempted to write his order on a napkin, the waiter pretended to misread it, bringing him a glass of milk instead of wine, children's chicken nuggets instead of the salmon he'd carefully illustrated. Each mistake drew more laughter, more pointing fingers, more cell phones capturing his humiliation for social media immortality. Through it all, the man remained unbroken. His jaw was set like granite, his posture unbowed, but those who looked closely, and precious few did, could see the pain gathering in his eyes like storm clouds. He was a king among peasants who had forgotten how to recognize royalty, a lion surrounded by hyenas who mistook his silence for surrender. But in the shadows of this grand theater of cruelty, one pair of eyes saw something different. She was young, perhaps 19, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that held wisdom beyond her years. While the rest of the restaurant participated in their collective mockery, she watched from her small table near the window, where she'd been nursing a single coffee for over an hour, a student stretching a budget, invisible to the wealthy predators around her. But unlike them, she understood what it meant to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to have your worth questioned by strangers. As the man's hands moved in their careful patterns, her eyes widened with recognition. Those weren't random gestures. They were words, beautiful and precise as poetry written in the air. She knew because her younger brother had been born deaf, and their family had learned to speak with their hearts through their hands. The restaurant's laughter reached a crescendo when the waiter, emboldened by his audience, began to mimic the man's sign language with exaggerated, nonsensical gestures. "Is this what you're trying to say?" he mocked, flailing his arms like a broken puppet. "Or maybe this?" The crowd roared their approval, their cruelty now a full-contact sport. That's when the young woman stood up. Her chair scraped against marble floor with a sound that cut through laughter like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward her, this unknown girl who dared interrupt their entertainment. She walked across the dining room with purpose, her chin raised, her hands already beginning to move in fluid, graceful signs. When she reached the man's table, she looked directly into his eyes and signed with perfect clarity. "I see you. I hear you. What would you like to say?" The transformation was immediate and breathtaking. The man's face, which had been a mask of controlled endurance, suddenly brightened like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. His hands moved with renewed energy, no longer begging for scraps of understanding, but finally giving voice through hers. She translated with quiet dignity. "He says he would like the pan-seared salmon with lemon risotto, and he'd appreciate it if you could treat him with the same respect you show every other paying customer." The restaurant fell into the kind of silence that follows lightning, heavy, electric, pregnant with change. The waiter's face drained the color as the reality of his cruelty crashed over him like a cold wave. The socialites shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their laughter dying in their throats as shame began its slow, inevitable creep up their necks. But the man wasn't finished. Through the girl's voice, he began to speak of other things: his recent acquisition of several hospitality chains, his upcoming board meeting about restaurant standards, his disappointment in how establishments sometimes forgot that every customer deserved dignity. The words were delivered softly, but they hit the room like hammer blows. The emerald-clad woman's face went ashen as recognition dawned. The man with the gold watch dropped his fork with a clatter that echoed through the suddenly tune-quiet dining room. Phone screens went dark as the social media vultures realized their entertainment might just destroy their own careers. Through it all, the man continued to sign, and the young woman continued to translate, her voice growing stronger with each word. He spoke of businesses built on respect, of success measured not just in dollars, but in how we treat those who seem to have no voice. He mentioned names, companies, foundations, buildings that bore his signature throughout the city. The very restaurant where they sat, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, was just one jewel in a crown they'd never bothered to recognize. The revelation hit the room like a tsunami of justice. Gasps echoed off the walls as diners realized they'd been mocking not just any customer, but the man who could buy and sell their entire social circle before dessert was served. The waiter stumbled backward, his face cycling through disbelief, terror, and the desperate calculation of a man watching his career crumble in real time. But the billionaire's response wasn't the explosive revenge his tormentors expected. Instead, he signed a single phrase to the young woman, who translated with quiet power: "True strength doesn't need to shout to be heard." What followed was a masterclass in dignity wielding justice. The man didn't rage or threaten. He simply nodded to someone across the room, a woman in a sharp business suit who had been dining alone, unnoticed by the crowd but clearly known to him. She approached with the efficient grace of an executive accustomed to handling crises. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had delivered both dreams and pink slips, "allow me to introduce Marcus Chun, CEO of Chin Hospitality Group and owner of this establishment, along with 47 others across 3 countries. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the scrambling, the desperate apologies, the fumbled attempts at damage control, the pathetic pleas for forgiveness from people who moments earlier had found cruelty entertaining. But Marcus Chen's response came through his translator's steady voice. "Some lessons are best learned through consequences." The waiter was terminated before his shift ended, his employment with the entire chain dissolved with a signature. The socialites who had led the mockery found themselves permanently banned not just from Le Chateau, but from every restaurant in the Qin Empire, a network that included most of the city's finest dining establishments. Their names would be shared discreetly but efficiently, ensuring their cruelty would cost them access to the very social world they treasured. But for the young woman who had chosen kindness over cowardice, who had become a voice for the voiceless, Marcus Chun had different plans. Through signs that she translated to the stunned room, He offered her a full-ride scholarship to any university she chose, an internship with his foundation that focused on accessibility and inclusion, and something far more valuable, his respect and gratitude. You saw a human being where others saw only entertainment. Her voice carried his words. That is the rarest and most precious gift in business or in life. As the evening wound down and the restaurant emptied of its humble clientele, Marcus Chun sat peacefully at his corner table, no longer isolated but surrounded by the quiet respect he'd always deserved. The young woman, Sarah, they'd learned her name was Sarah, sat across from him, their conversation flowing in the beautiful language of signs that spoke volumes about character, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what's right. The same dining room that had echoed with cruel laughter now hummed with a different energy, one of reflection, redemption, and a profound silence that follows a storm. Marcus raised his water glass in a toast that needed no words, and Sarah responded in kind. Two souls who had found connection in a world that often forgot to listen. The marble floors that had witnessed humiliation now bore witness to justice. The crystal chandeliers that had illuminated cruelty now cast their light on kindness rewarded. And in the corner where a man had once sat alone and mocked, two people shared a meal and a conversation that proved the most powerful voices often speak without making a sound. As they prepared to leave, Marcus signed one final message to Sarah, who smiled as she spoke it aloud to the nearly empty restaurant. Silence isn't the absence of power, it's the presence of patience. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen to change everything. The heavy glass doors of Le Chateau closed behind them, but the lesson lingered in the air like expensive perfume. In a world obsessed with noise, they had discovered something profound. True strength doesn't need to shout to shatter glass ceilings. Real wealth isn't measured by what you can buy, but by what you choose to build. And the most important conversations often happen without a single word being spoken. Sometimes justice arrives not with thunder, but with the quiet dignity of those who refuse to let silence be mistaken for surrender. Sometimes the most powerful people in a room are the ones others forget to notice. And sometimes one act of kindness creates ripples that transform not just lives, but entire worlds. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop a comment below and tell us about a time when someone chose to be your voice when the world wasn't listening. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because everyone deserves to have their dignity recognized and their story heard.